In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to edit your images so they look like something out of a thriller movie. So this process is quite simple. It's just a lot of color work, but it will only take you 5-10 minutes to do, and it can make your images really come alive. And as you can see here, it looks like a still from a movie. So I'm going to reset this and I'll just walk you through the process. Okay. So the first thing we want to do is come up to the color profile and click on the 4 boxes in the top right hand corner, and we want to select artistic number 3. So there we go. That just gives us a really good starting point with colors. Next thing I'm going to do is just bring the color temperature down to -4 and just bring the tint up a little bit to +5. The exposure, I just brought that down a little bit to -0.45 there, just to darken it off a little bit. And I'm going to bring the highlights down and the shadows up and the whites down and the blacks up. So the highlights on this particular image was -31, and the shadows, I brought them up to around +50. So on this particular shot it was +52. So yours might vary a couple of points here and there depending on your particular image. Then we're going to bring the whites down, so -42, and the blacks we are going to just bring them up a little bit to +15. So there we go. So we flattened the image quite a lot so that we can then color grade this further down the line. So I added a little bit of clarity to this. Usually I don't when I'm doing portraits, but it just helps bring out some of the structure of the grain that we're going to add later on. And it just helps. It's a part of the process that just gives it a little bit of bite into the image. So I also just pushed the dehaze up a little bit to, it was about +12 from this image. You might not need to do that on yours. Again, it depends on your shot. So the vibrance, we're going to push that up, and we're going to bring the saturation down. So vibrance, I'm going to bring that up to +44. And then the saturation, I'm just going to take the edge out of the image a little bit to about -19 to 20, around there. So if we look at that, you can see what we've done there. We've actually brought out lots of the oranges and the yellows, but we're starting to get that cinematic or that thriller look that you see in the movies. So moving to the tone curve, I'm just going to add a point in the middle and here where the whites are, and I'm literally just going to push them up ever so slightly, and this just gives us a little bit of an adjustment in that white area there. So moving down into the HSL panel, I'm going to start with the hues. So I'm going to bring the reds down to -51. I'm going to bring the oranges up to 12, so +12. The yellows I'm going to bring down to -46. Greens down to -67. Aqua up to +83. And the blues down to -23. There we go. And we skip the purple and the magenta. So in the saturation, I'm just going to bring the reds down just a little bit to -2. The orange down to -15. I'm going to bring the yellows down to -28. And I'm going to go -100 on the green. And the aqua, I'm going to bring that down to -91. And then the magenta, I'm going to push that up to +34. Then coming to the luminance, we're going to bring the reds down to -58. We're going to bring the orange down to -6. Yellow up +7. And the aqua -100. Blue is +23. And magenta -59. There we go. So when we look at that there, we can see, let's just have a quick look at the before and after of what we've done with the colors. You can see that we are just taking the sting out of the image ever so slightly. And the colors, you can see there what it's doing. Okay, right, so moving on to the main aspect of this image. So a lot of this is all done within the color grading here. So let's start with the shadow. So I'm going to come down to the bottom here where it says hue, double click. I'm going to type in a hue of 165, and then I'm going to double click on the saturation and type in 5. I'm then going to come to the blending, push that up to 100, and then move on to the next, which is the midtones. And the midtones, I'm going to double click on the hue and type in 98, and I'm going to double click on the saturation and type in 53. So you can see it's starting to come alive a little bit now. Let's click on to the highlights, and in this we're going to use a hue of 93 and just a saturation of 3. There we go. So that's looking pretty good. Now I'm going to come down to the sharpening, and I'm going to push this up to plus 37, and I'm going to change the radius to 0.9 and keep the detail at 25. Noise reduction, I'm going to push that up to plus 46 and leave the rest detail at 15, contrast at 0. And then in the color, I'm going to move that up to 12 and leave the detail and smoothness at 50. I'm then going to come down to the post-crop vignette. I'm going to pull the amount down to minus 30. The midpoint is going to be 20. And the roughness is going to be plus 29. And feather is going to be 80. And then the highlights left at 0. Now coming down to the grey, and we're going to move this up to 18. You might want to push this higher on your, depending on your image. Size, I'm going to keep the same as the amount, which is 18. And then roughness, I'm going to bring that down to 21. Okay, now I'm going to move up back to the tone curve, and this is going to be the final step. So the reason why I left the tone curve till last is because when we're adding contrast to an image, this particular phase is the last phase, and you want to have all the colors correct. You want to have everything else set so that you can then just make this one final adjustment, and you'll see the difference that it makes. So I'm going to make a point here. I'm going to come down and make another point there, another point there. So these are just within that vicinity at the minute. I'm going to come up to the top and just bring the whites down. So we're just flattening them whites. There we go. And then I'm going to come down to this point here. So within the sort of coming into the black, so I'm going to bring this down a little bit. And then this section here, this point, I'm going to bring this down too. And then I'm going to matte the blacks off. So I'm going to click on the bottom and just pull them up a little bit. And now it's just a case of making really, really small minor adjustments so we get this as smooth as possible. I think that's looking pretty good actually there. And then just coming up, just making sure that this is smooth as well. So I'm just going to bring them whites up a little bit more. So around there. And I think we could potentially just bring this down just to make that line a little bit smoother. There we go. So this is something you want to spend your time with and just really fine tune, and you'll see that small minor movements will make a really, really big difference. So if we look at the before and after of that tone curve, you can see it is a dramatic difference. It makes a huge difference to the overall image. So really, really take your time with that, okay? So one last thing we can do is come up to the top where we have selected the Artistic 3 profile, and we can just reduce the amount a little bit. This again is just one of them final steps that you want to just take your time with and get right. This particular one, I just dropped this down to it was around 80, around that mark there, and you can see the difference that it makes. It's only small, but it is a really big difference. So I'm going to drop this down to, I think actually around 77. I think that works really well on this particular image. So we look at the before and after. You can see there, that's the final result. So I hope you enjoyed that. I look forward to seeing your images. Take care. Bye bye.